Hey, how's it going everybody? It's theGameconomist, and today we'll be taking a look at the Smough Great Hammer. Okay, we'll start by taking a look at the build. Basically, this is also a Smough cosplay, so I have to have really high vitality. I've given up Tears of Denial, I've given up Filianor Chime, Oak Shield. Really, I just have my Blessed Castus, and I have an S-Stock for finishing opponents off. If you want more of an ideal build, I recommend dropping the vitality by a lot, hopefully enough that you can use something other than the Havel Ring, because Havel Ring is always inefficient. You also want to be able to bring Tears of Denial, and you probably want to bring your strength up to 60, so it's kind of just a combination of those things and deciding which one's more valuable if you can't do all three. It would also be nice if you could wear the Oak Shield rather than the Blessed Castus, because Oak Shield heals a little bit more than the Blessed Castus will. So yeah, that's what you'll want to do for an ideal build. Next, we're going to talk about the moveset. So basically, the Smough Hammer has a very vanilla moveset, and this kind of holds it back from the tier rating. The R1 is very normal. The R2 has a special animation, but it effectively works like a typical Great Hammer R2. And then finally, the weapon art is the Poise weapon art. Now, the Poise weapon art is too slow for duels. Your opponent gets plenty of time for the recovery frames to end, and then they roll away, or they predict that you're going to use that weapon art and they punish you while you're using it. So it's kind of very annoying. It's not that useful, guys. Even in invasions, it didn't feel that useful. Let's move on to talking about how to use the Smough Hammer in a duel. Hopefully you guys find this useful, because I feel like there isn't enough guides on the internet on how to use Great Hammers. They're a very challenging weapon. They're not for new players. This is a weapon for advanced players who have a very kind of a strong grasp of how the game works. Basically, with the Great Hammer, you don't have a viable approach, and you don't have any way to pressure your opponent. You have two options. You can outspace your opponent, or you can outtrade your opponent. Mostly you'll be out trading. So your opponent, a skilled opponent, is going to run at you as if they're going to attack, because they're trying to bait out your move. They're trying to bait out your R1 so that they can punish it. And it's your job to not be baited. You have to look at them and go, that's not a real attack. And basically, when they are coming in for a real attack, you need to be ready to trade at that point. And it's hard to do that. It's almost like playing, it's almost like gambling. It's almost like predicting. And it's one of the reasons that Great Hammers get held back in the tier ratings, because it's always easier to be the one pressuring than it is the one trying to predict the pressure. The person doing the pressuring has a little more control over the fight. Now you'll notice I do have a Castus in my offhand. Yeah, I don't think I parried anyone, but every now and then I would bring it out and I would use the actual punching attack to kind of throw my opponent off. The other trick I would use is I would actually use the kick, because the kick has a different animation than the R1 swing. So every now and then that would confuse an opponent and they would actually be stunned by the kick, and I could actually land an attack. And the reason why the kick would work is because your opponent will walk right up to you, right in range of your hammer, but they won't use any of their moves because they know that they'll have a recovery frame during their attack, and they know that you might predict them and be using your R1 at the same time. That would, that would effectively be a trade. So they want to get near you to try and bait you out, but they won't actually attack you. That's an opening to actually use a kick. It's like one of the few times in the game where I'll consider trying to kick my opponent. You have to be careful though, because they might attack the kick as well. It's very, just a lot of predicting going on when using a Great Hammer. Some things worth noting about the Smough Great Hammer in particular: without it being able to be infused to dark, and you can't buff it either, that means that it's a pure physical weapon, and it's going to be extremely weak to the Black Knight Shield. It's also susceptible to the Valor Heart. The Valor Heart can use a single R1 during your R1. It'll absorb all of the damage. It'll be very low on stamina, but you won't actually break the guard of a full stamina Valor Heart. So Valor Heart and Black Knight Shield will be extremely effective against this weapon. And then against all other weapons, it's just kind of like, it's okay. I mean, there are weapons that outspace it, they have better range. So it has a lot of weaknesses, not a lot of strengths, and the playstyle is very tricky. The weapon art doesn't really help. It's too slow. It's just going to be very tough, and when you see somebody using this weapon effectively, it's almost always somebody who's been playing the game a long time and knows what they're doing. For invasions, I feel like this weapon was a little more viable. You know, it has a very deadly drop attack. Great hammers in general are not bad in invasions. You're not able to chase very well, but you can punish an Estus really badly if you get close to it. You're going to outdamage the Estus, which is always one of the criteria I use when I'm judging a weapon for invasions. In group fights, you're not going to get staggered in the middle of your move. You're going to actually poise through the move, which allows you to escape if your opponent hits you back. See, if you're using a light weapon and you actually did trade with, let's say, a great hammer, that great hammer is going to stun you, stagger you, and your opponents, the rest of the host's friends are going to surround you while you're staggered. Well, with the great hammer, that doesn't happen. You poise through it, and you're able to roll to safety after your initial attack. So the high poise, heavy drop attack damage, you're able to punish an Estus. All of those are useful for invasions. I would say the only thing about this weapon is it doesn't really do as much damage as I would have liked for a great hammer. And with it, again, not being infusible, you're doing pure physical, which means that any opponent who is very effective with the shield, and that happens a lot in PvE when you're doing an invasion, hosts like to bring shields, by the way. So versus shield, this weapon's a little less effective because it's pure physical. And again, I think I already mentioned this, the running attack and the rolling attack are just kind of not that good, so it can be hard to chase down somebody who's about to die. It can be hard to chase them down and get that last hit in. In PvE, there's a lot of great hammers to use. There's no real reason to have to use this one. It doesn't deal the most damage. It has very good poise, but so do some of the other weapons like the Lido hammer. It doesn't have low stat requirements, which means it's not like you're going to use this on a low level build. So there's no real need to use the Smough hammer. However, with that being said, if we're just giving it a rating, it's a pretty easy weapon to use in PvE. The Perseverance weapon art is actually really good because opponents don't know to run away from you during that weapon art. They also don't know that they need to stop blocking when you're attacking them and they're using the shield. So you'll usually just break their guard, or they'll swap over to an attack not knowing that you're going to interrupt or trade with them. So yeah, this is just like all the other great hammers. This is an easy weapon to use in PvE, something new players would enjoy. It's just there are better options for other, if you're trying to go for more of an ideal great hammer build, probably something like Lido or great hammer or great club would be a better option. Alright, well, I want to thank all of you guys for watching. Next, there will be some invasion footage as usual, and at the end, there will be the tier ratings. See you guys next time.
No! I don't want that!
Ha 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 ha! You are no match for my style! Oh my god, it's Mark Zuckerberg! Oh my god, how do you do that? Ha ha ha! You tried to match my style and failed!
Oh, sirrah, how deliciously absurd!
Okay now, how many of you have played musical instruments before?
Do instruments of torture count?
No.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
No, Patrick, mayonnaise is not an instrument. Horseradish is not an instrument either.
I'm sorry.